Good evening and welcome to our fourth session of Chatting with Chaplains. This evening, we will be speaking with campus chaplains or those who serve with religious organizations on various campuses, college, as well as elementary school. And this evening, we are excited to have three chaplains who have worked in this capacity and have a long history of it. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves, beginning with Garrett Burns, and we will take it from there. So go ahead, Garrett, introduce yourselves. I always forget to introduce myself. I'm Felicia Levant, and I'm one of the recruiting associates at Memphis Theological Seminary. So we're excited to have you all. Okay, Garrett.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Chaplain Garrett Burns. I'm Cumberland Presbyterian. I'm the associate chaplain at Bethel University. My senior chaplain actually is a female. We were just talking about, you see a male panel here, but her name is Reverend Dr. Ann Hames, and I'm a poor substitute for her, but I had to fill in. She couldn't make this meeting, but I'm glad to be here. I've been in university chaplaincy since 2017, so about 4 years now, and glad to be able to share anything I can.
Cedric.
Good evening. I am Cedric Von Jackson. Currently, I am the senior pastor at the West Hunter Street Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. Before moving to Atlanta, I served 6.5 years as the chaplain and dean of students at St. George's Independent School, Memphis campus, right there in Memphis, Tennessee. 27 years as an educator, and thankful to be here.
And you pastored in this area also, right? You were bivocational.
I did. That's correct. I was bivocational when I was still in the Memphis area. I pastored the Askew Grove Baptist Church in Longtown, Mississippi.
Wonderful. Morgan?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Morgan Stafford. I serve as executive director at Memphis Wesley Foundation. We work with students at the University of Memphis, Christian Brothers University, Owen College, and Rhodes College.
Wonderful. Now, Morgan, I'm going to let you elaborate a little further, because we know that Garrett and Cedric serve as chaplains, but you mentioned serving with the Wesley Foundation. So Garrett mentioned that his affiliation and the school that he serves at actually is Cumberland Presbyterian, and that's the tradition that he pastors in. But can you tell us a little bit more about the Wesley Foundation?
Yes, Wesley Foundations are campus ministry organizations affiliated with the United Methodist Church. Our organization partners with colleges and universities in ministry with college students. And so our ministry has traditionally been for many years in ministry with students at the University of Memphis and has recently become a multi-campus organization. So we work primarily with undergraduate college students here in Memphis.
Wonderful. And beyond that, do you all only service students who have a United Methodist background, or?
No, ma'am. We have a very diverse group of students, some who are cradled United Methodists and know about us, as they grow up, and others who we meet, during their college years. Some have no religious affiliation. So we have a very diverse group, and all students are welcome.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, gentlemen, the first question I want to ask you, because Chaplain Burns and I just got through talking about the fact that he is trivocational. He pastors, he serves as a chaplain at Bethel University, which is also an primarily undergraduate program, and he's also a military chaplain. But at Bethel, Garrett, how did you end up becoming a campus chaplain?
Yeah, the short story is I was a youth pastor about 9 years prior to that, and began to transition, as many youth pastors do, into associate pastor ministry. So I was serving sort of both ends of the spectrum, the age spectrum there. And I had a young family of my own, and I felt like I was giving more throughout the week with the rhythm of the church, I felt like I was giving more to my church family than I was my family. And because most of the time, church meetings are in the evenings. They're on the weekends. They're not within the typical school schedule. So when my kids got home from school, I was going to a youth event instead of spending time with my young children who weren't a part of the youth program at the time. So I just prayed about it. I went through a season about 6 months. I'm like, God, I need your help figuring out how to do this, parent and nurture and disciple my children. And if it means being available to you wherever you're going to call me, I'll be available. And so as we're going through this season, my wife, I talked to her. I asked her, where are you feeling called? She's like, I don't feel called away from McKinsey. And I was serving in McKinsey at the time. And I said, well, I don't feel led to be at the church anymore. So what are we going to do? And so we kind of came to an impasse, and we've looked at several churches. And then I got a phone call, as I shared earlier, from Senior Chaplain Ann Hames. It was about 6 months after we began this discernment process. And she said, what would you think about, considering a call to campus chaplaincy? And I said, I would love it, because it answered that. We were still in McKinsey, and that was my wife's commitment and call to nesting and nurturing our children. And it fit the rhythms of our life more than the call to pastoral ministry at that time. And so I could nurture my children and minister on campus. Sorry, that was a long story, but that's my call. Very unique.
That's great.
And it was
then
more
you're
of
also a graduate
yeah.
of Bethel, right? You're a graduate of Bethel, right?
Right. So, yeah, I never saw myself being at my alma mater. I would work with Chaplain Hames. I would help provide pulpit supply or chapel speaking every now and then. She would call me and say, hey, can you fill in for me at communion, or can you speak at chapel? I'd say, yes, ma'am, whatever you need. And I think that's when she began to envision our working relationship, was those times I served on campus. And we had a good, healthy youth program. And I was already working with teenagers and young adults in the call process. And it was a very natural transition. In fact, many of those youth that felt like I was abandoning them whenever I told them I'm feeling called away from the church, but I'm going to be over here at Bethel. Many of those youth I ended up nurturing at Bethel, because they enrolled at Bethel, and I ended up working with them from middle school till they graduated college. Many of them got married at this time. So a beautiful transition, and only God could do something like that.
Wonderful. Dr. Von Jackson, did you set out when you were in seminary? Did you set out with the idea, or did you sense a calling and you knew that you were going to be doing chaplaincy with on a campus, on a school campus? You're muted.
Yeah, sorry, absolutely not. So I, like I said, it was about 6.5 years ago, and I was in my bivocation at that moment was an attendance school principal, K through 12 principal, and pastor of a small church. So I was bivocational at that point, and experienced a really rough season at the school that I was serving as principal, and ended up leaving that school a year and 3 months into being in that position. So we're talking October of a calendar school year. And so I ended up leaving that position because of some bad experiences, and literally was out of a job. And it was such a God thing that I was searching for a job, looking for another job in education. I had interviewed with a few places, and was on either like Career Builder or Monster or one of those job sites, and a banner. I had never heard of St. George's before in my life. A banner for St. George's Independent School popped up at the bottom of the website, and I clicked on it, just curious about what this was all about. And there was a position for an interim chaplain position. And so I thought, that sounds interesting. Let me inquire. I have the youth ministry background. I have the pastoral background. I've got, all of this experience. Most of my education experience have been in elementary education, either in the classroom or from an administrative standpoint. So I've been around kids my whole life. And so I applied, and
the rest is history.
And the rest is history.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So Morgan, it sounds like these vocations called them. Tell us a little bit about your background and history and how you ended up being the executive director of the Wesley Foundation.
Yes, my journey to campus and collegiate ministry began when I was a college student. I was very involved in university ministries, had good, strong mentoring relationships with our chaplain at my alma mater, Belmont University in Nashville, and actually got to help start a Wesley ministry as a college student there at Belmont. And so had a very formative experience during my college years, and wondered if leading campus ministry might be in my future. And a number of years later, that door did open. So a neat full circle experience.
What a blessing. So my next question is, this is, as I mentioned, this is our fourth conversation, and we spoke on Monday with healthcare chaplains. Tuesday, we spoke with prison ministry. And then yesterday, we spoke with military. All of those chaplaincy areas had specific educational requirements. Some required ordination, some required, matter of fact, all of them required ordination. All of them required endorsements. What are the educational requirements, or are there any specific educational requirements for one serving as a campus chaplain? Again, I know that Garrett and Dr. Jackson have MDiVs, and Dr. Jackson has gone on to do his DMin. Morgan, can you all speak to it? Even though you have them, was that a requirement?
For me, I have a bachelor's degree and a master of divinity.
Okay.
In terms of colleagues who I have both in other Wesley Foundations, as well as other campus ministry positions, I have colleagues who are ordained and have seminary degrees, colleagues who, like myself, are seminary trained laypersons, as well as colleagues with different professional backgrounds. And so depending on school, region, and denomination, those can be a bit wide in terms of campus and collegiate ministry.
So do most of your friends, though, you mentioned, I'm glad you said Master of Divinity, because the problem is so many times when we speak the language, we assume everybody knows what we're talking about. Of course, the MDiv is the Master of Divinity. So, but now you mentioned that it varies, but as far as your friends are concerned, do they all have some advanced theological or biblical studies training, or no?
My understanding is that varies on denomination.
Okay.
So most of my colleagues in the United Methodist tradition do have some sort of seminary or theological education. And so that can vary in terms of these positions.
Okay. Chaplain Burns and Dr. Jackson, Von Jackson, do you all know for instance, when you looked at the position, Dr. Von Jackson, did it have any particular educational requirements?
So it was more so the requirements were from an educational standpoint, more so than a divinity standpoint. I do know that it did not hurt that at the time when I accepted the position that I had completed my Master of Divinity, that didn't hurt. I also know that, so St. George's has 3 campuses. We have the campus that I worked on, the Memphis campus. We have our sister campus, which is in Germantown, which is just like the Memphis campus, pre-K through 5th grade. And then the Collierville campus is 6th through 12th grade. And each campus has its own chaplain. I know my credentials, the DMin and the MDiv. I know that at Germantown, their chaplain, again, St. George's is an Episcopal school. Their chaplain just was recently ordained as a deacon in the Episcopal Church. That was pretty much so that we maintained our Episcopal identity, and we were able to say, you know, we have someone that's ordained in the Episcopal faith that is connected to our school. But the chaplain at the Collierville campus, she has, I believe, a master's in education, but she also has a master's in clinical social work. And so she does not have a divinity degree at all. So like Morgan said, you know, it really depends on the campus and the denomination.
Okay. And Garrett, I was smiling because Garrett had company hugging his face, the cat's tail. How cute.
I'm not even a cat guy. He's not mine. He's the kids. And he knows it. He's rubbing it in.
He wants you to share the screen. He wants to share screen time. So Garrett, at Bethel, with your particular appointment, were there any specific educational requirements? I know that, again, Bethel is Cumberland Presbyterian by tradition. And I know that both you and Chaplain Haynes are ordained in the Cumberland Presbyterian Church, but was that a requirement for the position?
For the position, yeah, the MDiv was required and ordination was required for this particular position. Now, that the history of the chaplain role at Bethel was pretty unique because from what I gather, it used to be a faculty member who served as that designated role. So that person obviously could have a higher degree, typically a PhD or a doctorate of ministry, and then serving adjacently as chaplain. As Bethel grew and was able to, you know, add more positions and sort of substantiate the role of chaplain standing alone, it didn't have to serve as a faculty member. So I'm staff. I do adjunct faculty work. I teach a class or two as needed, and then Chap teaches. She's not full-time, but she teaches 3-4 classes in a semester, and she has her doctorate of ministry. So I think if you know, the campus were to shrink on a needs basis, they probably would use a faculty member in that position to serve, you know, as a chaplain, have a dual role. But we're blessed to be able to have 2 chaplains on campus right now. We both have very unique responsibilities, but that's getting ahead of your question. So. Oh
no, that's okay, because that's what I was going to ask. Morgan, do you or Dr. Von Jackson, did either of you teach at all while you were in serving in those capacities, or no? At the
I
school?
did.
Did you serve as faculty, I guess is what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay.
As chaplain at St. George's, I taught all of our classes. All of our students go through a specialties class rotation, which includes music, art, PE, library, technology, religion class. And so I taught pre-K through 5th grade, all of the religion classes. In addition to that, we had for our 1st through 5th graders, we had 2 chapel services per week that followed the Episcopal morning prayer outline and order of worship. And then we had, for our senior kindergartners, we had chapel with them once a week. And then for our pre-K, JK students, we were on a 7-day rotation, and we had chapel with them 1 day out of the 7-day rotation. So we did those chapels, and I taught all those religion classes.
Okay, what about you, Morgan?
My position is I am an employee of our denominational body. And so my position, I do not adjunct with any of the affiliated universities. My position was split at one time between our district. And so I did some work with our district and worked with a number of local congregations with some work in addition to the campus ministry work with the students. I'm now full-time and get to work full-time with our college students.
Wonderful. So what I'm hearing you all say is that the educational requirements can vary depending upon the campus and the need. And so one of the other questions that has come up is whether or not and it sounds like based on what you all have said, that this is not a requirement or necessity, but just to be clear, for the hospital chaplains, they had to have so many clinical pastoral, they had to have so much clinical pastoral education or CPEs. Neither the prison nor the military chaplains had to have CPEs, right, Garrett?
That's correct. It's very encouraged, and you can, in the military, you can have specific designator that shows you had CPE experience, so you can serve in hospitals. But we don't have that, at least on our campus. So
okay, so in the campus context, are CPEs required or any board certifications?
Not in our context. I would imagine, depending on the size of the university and what its role is, that it would be encouraged. I do work adjacent to our nursing program and our physician's assistants program. They do not have CPE opportunities there, but in my mind, I would think that would be highly encouraged if your chaplain is working within a medical training school. Now, we do strongly encourage, but this is not required, the ASSIST training, which is the Applied Suicide Intervention Skills training, and the CISM training, which is a critical incident stress management. Those are encouraged, but they're not required either. So.
Wonderful. What about in your context, Morgan? Any CPEs? Are CPEs required?
Not a requirement for most of our positions. Relevant experience working with college students or young people is typically the experience in addition to the educational requirements.
Wonderful. And so Dr. Von Jackson, based on what you said, that wasn't a requirement for your context either. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So with that in mind, so no CPEs necessarily required, but what about continuing education? All of you have your Master of Divinity, but have been out of school maybe a little while from those degrees. What type of continuing education? For instance, Dr. Von Jackson was just talking about suicide, and I mean, there are a lot of variables and a lot of
I think that was Garrett
that students have now that maybe they weren't dealing with so much when you all were working on your MDiv, such as we talk about this whole suicide thing. I'm sure that even in college, even though we see it, but Cedric was actually in elementary school, but bullying. So there are so many issues now that students are dealing with. So what type of continuing education do you all participate in, or do you participate in any kind of continuing education?
There are conferences that are available to us, which are very helpful. Within the institution itself, the benefit of working in an academic institution is you kind of get to spend time with professionals who are trained in these fields. So it happens organically because you're working along the professionals. So you'll get to glean from the best that your campus has to offer. I work with our Title IX and our Title IX and preventions coordinator. And so she's all the time. We have annual training for suicide intervention. We have, drug abuse trainings. We have sexual assault prevention. The list kind of goes on of the things that our prevention coordinator offers and is expected for faculty and staff to be a part of. But also we collaborate a lot. We have to refer often to our clinical services. And so that collaboration is very helpful in for one, fine tuning this and my heart as well, just to have those resources available.
That's wonderful. What about for you, Morgan? Is it a similar situation or?
I agree, really endless opportunities in terms of continuing education and formation provided, at a denominational level, peer groups of colleagues who serve in similar campus ministry or collegiate ministry positions, working across interdenominational and interfaith groups of folks who serve locally, primarily with college students. And then, as Garrett said, the endless opportunities that are available on campus that we can participate in. So I think that's one of the attractions to this type of work is really you're in that continuous learning environment.
Wonderful. Yours would have been, the situation would have been a little unique, Dr. Von Jackson. So what about for you? I know you did your doctor of ministry in the area of mental health. So I know that you did a lot of research with regards to that, but beyond that, any particular training that has been beneficial for you beyond your theology, your Master of Divinity? And
Right. So St. George's belongs to at least two national organizations. One is NAES, National Association of Episcopal Schools. And then they also belong to the national NAIS, National Association of Independent Schools. And they sponsor conferences throughout the year. There's also the state level of TAIS for independent schools, and they provide programming in all areas of education, K through 12 education. They do work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. They do work in self-care and ministering to those with mental health disorders. So there's a whole gamut. Plus, in my position, one of the things that I was fortunate to have was a school counselor. And we worked hand in hand with working with students and working with families whenever they had like mental health issues, concerns that came up. If there were needs for community partners, community resources that the families needed to tap into, we worked really closely hand in hand to make sure that the students had access to those resources.
wonderful. Morgan, what would you say is your favorite aspect of your position as the executive director at Wesley? What's your favorite part? What makes you look forward to coming every day?
For me, I really enjoyed the mentoring relationships that emerge with the students that I get to work with, watching them, grow, freshman to senior. And then beyond, being able to keep up with, alums from our program and seeing the ways that they are making a difference in the world. So I really appreciate the mentoring relationships, the leadership development that occurs with those students, as well as the vocational discernment, seeing them have that emerging clarity about what they hope to do. It's an exciting time in their lives, and so it's exciting for us to be able to journey alongside them.
Wonderful. What would you say, Garrett? What is your favorite aspect of it? Because I know you mentioned some similar experiences to what Morgan is talking about, young people who started out in your church in the youth ministry, but you've actually helped encourage and nurture them beyond and into college and beyond. But what would you say is your favorite aspect of what you do when you reevaluate or reassess every year? Am I making a difference? So what's your favorite aspect of the position?
Yeah, that definitely more what Morgan said, but just to maybe add a layer to that vocational identity that he named. The cool thing about being on a college campus is that you have so many opportunities that these kids are involved in. So you're spending time with future doctors, lawyers. You're spending time with future maybe professional athletes. Or one of our coaches now, he was a professional athlete, came back as a coach. The opportunities are endless as far as where you get to insert yourself as a chaplain. You get to go into all these unique contexts. Tomorrow I'm going to be spending time with the football team. They have a game on Saturday, so we have a devotional set up. There's times where I went running at 5 a.m. one morning and the softball team was out practicing. I stopped by and checked with the coach. I went to an academic theater performance the other day and watched and witnessed what they were doing. It's always something new, and it's so beautiful just to be able to, as a chaplain, have that pastoral authority to go wherever I want to go. Even uninvited sometimes, and to be welcomed because we're at a Christian campus. They sort of expect you to be there. So it's not only is it exciting to have the opportunity, but it's a duty which can make it exhausting at times. But I really think that's one of my favorite parts is just being in such a diverse context.
Wonderful. One of the things that I've said a couple of times in these conversations is one of the advantages, one of the real blessings of the Memphis Theological Seminary experience, as far as the Master of Divinity and all of our course preparation, is the fact that we are an ecumenical institution with over 20 denominations represented. We have people from various faith backgrounds and traditions. And so I anticipate in your roles on campus religious leadership that you come across people from various backgrounds and traditions. So how was your seminary experience beneficial in helping you to minister, because you all minister at the end of the day to these young people? How was that kind of diversity and exposure? Because I know one of the things Garrett talked about yesterday, coming from a small rural community with limited exposure to perhaps some of the broader religious and faith traditions, I would think that it can be kind of challenging sometimes to deal with other beliefs. So how do you all, did seminary prepare you for it, or did you do it, or did you come from that kind of background on your own, that kind of diverse exposure, or how does that work for you? How are you dealing with all the various faith traditions?
So I guess I'll go first.
Okay.
I was born and raised straight up missionary Baptist, and but I've always considered myself to be pretty open-minded. So when I got to MTS, and experienced the ecumenical nature of MTS, even though it is a Cumberland Presbyterian school, just being exposed to the different denominations and none. MTS even has Muslim students and students that don't practice at all. So again, coming to that, I was already pretty open-minded. And then when I went to St. George's, to be able to, I like to joke with people all the time and say, I'm Baptopelian now. And so, but a big tenet of what we always taught at St. George's was, we really hone in on the idea that all of us are children of God. And that's what we instill in all of our kids, regardless of the faith background that they bring. And so I think MTS helped to broaden my horizons, broaden my understanding of some concepts that I was already unpacking and dealing with myself, even though I'm Baptist.
Okay. Either of you, either Morgan or Garrett, want to speak to that?
Yeah, I agree. It definitely broadened my view of the church universal, the church that God sees that we don't always see. And one of the things that I inherited that Reverend Ann Hames, all the students call her Chap. That's her nickname.
Right.
And so one of the things I inherited from her was even more of an awareness of that religious plurality on campus, but also our unique Christian identity. So when students come on campus, we'll give them a form that has all the local churches available to them. And we'll tell them, one is that, we are an extension of the church, but we're no replacement for your church.
That's
you need
good.
to find a local church family. And we find it's more important for them to, they're just passing through. This is just a season of their life, but they need to be grounded with a community that's going to be able to keep up with them week to week. So we typically won't do baptisms on campus. That's one of the things we really feel like it's unique to a local church. So we're doing our best to get them there, to feed them while we can, but also to point them back to a church that can hold them and nurture them like the church should. So, and the MTS did prepare me for that, because I'm not sitting there shooting them to the CP church. I often listen to their background and listen to their concerns, and I'll recommend churches to them based upon really where they're at spiritually and what I know about the local churches in the area and how they can fit in with that community.
What about you, Morgan? I'm sure at the University of Memphis, there are a plethora faith traditions and experiences that the students bring to the table. I can imagine what is it like in a conversation or a meeting with students from the various backgrounds? How does that work, Morgan?
So, University of Memphis, a very diverse school, as you all know, now being a multi-campus community, watching students from Christian Brothers University, a Catholic affiliated school, Lemoyne-Owen College, historic HBCU, and then Rhodes College, private liberal arts school. And so watching the students from those 4 schools now participating in the same collegiate ministry is just a fascinating experience. And it's been a joy to see relationships forming, from students across many different backgrounds. And I think my theological education certainly was very formational in preparing me to do work in this diverse context.
Wonderful. So we spoke about what your favorite thing was. What would you say is the most challenging aspect of chaplain ministry? Because there can be the difficulties. We think about these campus killings and, all kinds of things that students might have to deal with. And of course, one of the first places, it seems, I think about 9/11 and other events, the Kroger event, there were chaplains that showed up for that event. So there are also the difficult times that you have to deal with in the lives of your community. So how do you all process that? How do you not only service your students, but I think about the fact that you've got to certainly internalize some of that too, So how do you all deal with what are some of the most challenging aspects of being a chaplain on a campus?
I'd say right now,
buffering, Garrett.
with COVID is the
Okay.
separation and fractured community. College students are particularly. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Y'all go ahead. Okay.
No, go ahead. You want to
I'd
roll
say-
about the COVID situation.
Yeah, I'd say the fractured community is really difficult, particularly with COVID. College students they just thrive for relationship, and more than that, they're already separated from home and from the community that they know. And so college, particularly that context, is so important about forming a home away from home for them. And so it's really difficult. There's a lot of loneliness, a lot of isolation, which leads to depression, which leads to suicidal ideation and alcohol abuse. Those are the things we're seeing upticks in on campus, is alcohol abuse and suicidal ideation. Very difficult to minister to, but I'm blessed to be able to refer to clinical services when I need to, but also to be able to equip them spiritually to be able to bear with one another and to bear with this season that God's calling us all into during this time. So definitely have to build some resiliency. We have rhythms. Chapel really helps me personally because I'm not often preaching. I am preparing that, but I get to see different speakers come in and be fed by them. We have a communion service that's a very, very highly liturgical service that's nearly the same every week. So that's a constant. It's a bedrock. And because we're a Christian school, we have prayer in the mornings. So it's built into where I'm at, into our context that I be fed, and very much appreciate that.
Wonderful. What about you, Morgan?
I would say in my context, because we are an affiliated organization partnering with colleges and universities, rather than being on campus per se, there is that additional boundary between us and being able to meet and build relationships with students. And so sometimes in a position such as mine, just being able to build those relationships with students, and let students know that our services are available, that we are a welcoming space for them. And so finding creative ways just to get to know students and to spread the word about our organization.
Wonderful. Now, Dr. Von Jackson, you mentioned that your role was both chaplain and disciplinarian. That's got to be like a parent. That's got to be really hard to navigate, because you're supposed to love on them and hug on them in one regard, and then you've got to, call them on the carpet in the other regard. So how does one balance that type of those roles?
Yeah, it's a thin line. So one of the things that I do, or that I did, to balance that, is to make sure that the students saw me in times when I was not coming in to be the disciplinarian or the chaplain, right? So I made myself available just by dropping into classrooms, or making sure that they saw me when they were out at recess. So when they saw me, they would call me Reverend Jackson, but I don't think when they saw me on the playground, they saw me as the chaplain. They just saw me as this big guy, this kid who came out here to check on us and see how we're doing, and maybe even play basketball or soccer or swing with me, right? So in taking the time to build those relationships, then I have the capital to be able to go in as chaplain when I need to be a chaplain, but also to be able to go in and be the disciplinarian when I needed to be that too. And I had to take the time to develop those same kinds of relationships with families, so that when I made a phone call, it would really get kind of comical that I would make a phone call and I would say, "Hey, this is Reverend Jackson," and they would go, "Oh no, what have he done? What has he done now?" I'm like, no, I'm just calling to check in, right? So it's a really thin line. But then to the other question about the difficult times,
Mm-hmm.
From an elementary school standpoint, I found that the most difficult times to minister were the times actually when it was the adults who were behaving badly.
Oh, wow.
Right. So, and how that affects the children. And when I say that, I think specifically like every election cycle, right? I'm working with 3, 4, 5, up to 10-year-old kids who are bringing mom and dad's baggage around their
Ideology.
favorite candidate to school, and not everybody's household agrees. And so now I'm having to mediate between these Republican family kids and these Democrat family kids and things like that. So again, it's not necessarily the kids that are behaving poorly, it's the adults that are behaving badly, and then it's being projected onto the kids, and they're bringing that kind of stuff to school.
Speaking of that, when we talk about challenges, one of the things I think about is that, again, all of you have religious affiliations, but have any of you ever had situations where you have had young people that you're working with who have previously had bad religious experiences, bad, backgrounds that cause them to be confused, to be challenged, to push back against what you are trying to help them to do in their lives? And if so, how do you handle those situations?
That's every. Go ahead, Morgan.
Something we hear often is students who will maybe come with a friend, give us a try, and they go away saying, this was different than what I expected, or I was hesitant to come, but I'm glad that I did. And that typically stems from a negative experience that they had, whether that was, visiting a previous church or organization, or perhaps, growing up in a place that was not welcoming. So, typically there are reasons behind that, whether it's a theology that they don't agree with, or that they have outgrown, or discrimination based upon race, sexuality. That we hear those things from students very often, and so we just try our best. Our mission statement is to be a diverse and inclusive campus ministry, and that's very important for us.
Okay. What were you going to say, Garrett?
Every day, that's something we deal with, and the layers that come with Bethel is we're unapologetically Christian, but we're open, as Morgan said, we're open and inclusive to anybody who wants to come. So with the decline of Christendom in the West, in the United States, we see a lot of our students are nuns, they're agnostics, or they're sort of coming out of a religious home that they don't understand or maybe have been abused in. And the beautiful thing about the chaplaincy is that we get to see them at different points, as I shared earlier, different points, practices, games. So they're exposed to who we are in an unconventional way, as less than what they would in church, or if they went to the church. And it's more conversational, and it's a lot more counseling. Now, one of the things that being on a Christian campus, one of the challenges is that we have required chapel as a part of our identity.
Oh, wow.
And we think that's valuable to who we are. So when we have people who come in who feel like, that's unfair, unjust to require them to come to chapel, one thing I encourage them, I said, use it as an educational opportunity instead of seeing it as a religious obligation. Use it as a chance to observe who we are. We have a lot of different denominations that we bring in. So you're going to understand a lot about Christianity by the time you leave. And the other side of that is it does afford us the opportunity to see those who are resistant or reluctant. And we do our best to make ourselves available to them as best we can if they want to have those challenging conversations about faith and religion.
Wonderful. Well, now, one thing about it, I want to ask, what advice would you, as our time, we come to close towards the end, this time always goes so quickly, but what advice would you give an aspiring chaplain from the perspective that when I consider the longevity of each of you and how long you've been in your roles, and there are only so many campus chaplain opportunities out there, not all college campuses or even elementary school in particular have opportunities for those who are in religious leadership. So what advice would you give to someone who desires to be a chaplain in a campus context or setting? Cedric came in here through his educational background. Garrett went to his school. Morgan worked on college campus with his. So most of you, well, all but Dr. Von Jackson had an affiliation or a relationship with organizations that allowed them to then take advantage of that relationship. So, but what advice would you have to somebody who has a heart for the kids, the young people, really want to be able to help guide and nurture and mentor, as you all have talked about, and counsel? What would somebody do that wanted to do what you do?
So I think this is what I tell my ministry students who think they're bound to pastoral ministry. Mm-hmm. I say, get that MDiv, and then the door might open. That degree is such a prerequisite for so many chaplain positions and other positions. It's almost universally recognized, even though it is, I'd say we're lessening some of the requirements. It's diminishing a little bit, but get the MDiv and then wait on God. There's so many opportunities after that, and just pray, and God may open a door just like He did for us, providentially.
Okay. Dr. Von Jackson and Morgan, what would you all say?
Yeah, I would say that time of, unless you're just thrown into it by necessity like I was, but that time of discernment is so important. You have to, I think what made this the perfect fit for me was, first of all, my love of God, but then my love of kids. And then, having been in public education for as long as I was, 20 plus years, then having an opportunity to be in a situation where I get to share my faith in ways. And I was looking up, I think it's John Pavlovich that said, when you get in there, just don't be a jerk about it. I had to learn to lay down my Baptist roots. I'm not there to convert. I'm not there to proselytize. I'm not there to get anybody saved. Whereas in the Baptist church, that's what I'm all about, getting you saved, right? But from that standpoint, you succeed when you learn how to just not be a jerk about it and just be who you authentically are. So yeah, that's all I would say.
What about you, Morgan?
In addition to theological education, I would encourage folks to have conversations with folks who are engaged in this work, and also look for opportunities to get involved. Volunteer. And Garrett mentioned earlier, he had served as a speaker, led worship, and so I think those are great opportunities as well. Look for those opportunities to interface with college students, with chaplains, and I think that building those relationships and that network can certainly lead to an open door as well.
And ironically, the beauty of what I've heard from all of you is that all of your varied backgrounds and experiences all work together to help prepare you to be great in the capacity that you're in. None of you said that from 10 years old, I knew I wanted to be a college chaplain, or I knew I wanted to serve in a college religious community. So that God allowed your experiences, because even with you, Dr. Von Jackson, having been an educator, but having a love for children, and even though in your mind that wasn't what you set out to do, but you wouldn't have stuck to it as long as you did if there were not some type of reward in it. And so one of the things is, I agree with what Morgan was saying, is that if we will bloom where we're planted, if we serve faithfully with what God, because sometimes we're just sitting around waiting. It's got to be a certain way. And then that's the other thing, that these conversations this week have really, in my opinion, been a blessing, because it allows people to see that there's more than one way to do this. And that while some of them do require CPEs and board certification, others don't necessarily. What I have heard across the board is that the MD, Master of Divinity, can be advantageous no matter what, to have that theological background and to have that understanding, because it is during the Master of Divinity courses that you're going to learn about various faith traditions. You're going to learn about worship. You're going to learn about preaching. You're going to learn about care, providing care for people. And so the robustness of an MDiv, while you do get that academic preparation, but one of the things is that the blessing is, at MTS, and I'm sure where you did your Master of Divinity also, Morgan, we had clinical practicum. So we had to get out there and do the work. And that's another advantage or a blessing about MTS, is there's the practical experience that goes with the academic. And so if you will serve where God has planted you, more often than not, God will create the opportunity and open the door. Don't you all agree? Wonderful. So I guess my last question would be, as far as how has chaplaincy changed since you all have been in the roles that you're in, as far as serving on college campuses? When you came in the door, is there anything that's different now? For instance, Garrett's already spoken to COVID and the distancing that people have to maintain. Is there anything else?
I'm much better at Zoom.
Okay, you're better at Zoom. Yay, you. Anything else? Well, you know what though? Now with that, Morgan, how does one maintain and develop relationships via this Zoom thing? How do people connect?
I had the benefit, I know Morgan has an answer for this too. I had the benefit of, as soon as COVID hit, I was in conversations with the Seamen's Church, which is connected to my Navy chaplain experience. And they were doing spiritual wellness, which was through the Living Compass training. It's an Episcopal derived resource. And they were doing that at the time. And as soon as we went full virtual, I started incorporating spiritual wellness conversations and chats via Zoom. So I guess to answer that question is, there are still ways to maintain community if we try. There's a lot of versatility with our technology. We can still get Zoom fatigue, as many of us had, but at least we have this as a resource and can continue to utilize it if our students need it, as they need it.
Wonderful. So you have to be flexible. Anything
Yeah.
else, Morgan, you want to add to that?
Lots of creative ministry opportunities. Our students teach us creative ways to build community. It gives you an opportunity to connect with students and guest speakers across, the country and the world. So we've seen a lot of new and exciting possibilities. And even now we do a lot of hybrid programming, and that has allowed for us, especially as a multi-campus organization, students can join in and participate, whether that's in person or online. And I know that MTS is doing a lot of hybrid as well. So that's a real blessing.
With that, something you just mentioned, just touched on real quickly before you all leave. We've talked about what your roles and responsibilities are as it pertains to leadership and in the chaplaincy and the religious sector. But how involved are your students? What do you all do? How do your students, do you all do all of the work? Do you do all of the leadership? Do you do all of the counseling? How involved are you all? I know you nurture the students, but what do they do? What do they get out of it and put into it?
Our organization is student led. That's our model. So we have a student leadership team. They are empowered. We have paid internships.
Wow, that's good to know.
We put a big, a lot of priority upon developing student leaders in a faith setting.
Wonderful. What about you guys, Garrett?
I'm blessed to have a couple of work studies who work in the chaplain's office that help quite a bit. So they do get paid for their work as well. And we have to rely on that in the absence of some administration. We have all our ministry students, the CP ministry students specifically have helped set up with worship and do odds and ends like that, greeting and helping us whenever we need them. So.
Wonderful. And I guess Dr. Von Jackson, in your context is just about keeping the kids on track. Or do the kids, are they involved in any, you say you have worship and that type of thing?
Right. So actually, with the exception of, and as I say, with the exception of, it's also changing. With our chapel services, the students are the ones who lead the worship.
Wow.
So they're the one, I mean, it's our fifth graders. That's one of their, we have what we call Citizenship Council. And it's a leadership opportunity for our fifth graders because they're our oldest kids, but they are the ones who are doing the scriptural readings, leading in the prayers and those pieces. And I was going to say, with the exception of what we call at our campus chapel talks, which is basically the homily, which traditionally had been the chaplain, but in my transition and trying to figure out how we were going to supplement the chapel talks, the homilies, all of our fifth grade students, as part of their crossing requirement, they have to deliver a fifth grade speech. Wow. And so what we did this year was, as I was getting ready to transition from St. George's to Atlanta, we started incorporating the fifth grade speeches as the chapel talk, because all of the topics are either religious based or character development based or things like that. And so for the majority of the remainder of this semester, the chapel speaker will actually be a fifth grade student.
That is wonderful. Well, we again, thank you all so much for your participation. I'm sure the churches that the young people that you all are helping to mentor and encourage and serve appreciate your partnership, because as has been said, you all are often sending these young people back into the churches. You're definitely sending them into the community, helping them to be good citizens. And so the work that you all do is very necessary, because we know that these young people are the future leaders in the church and in the world, and they are the ones who will carry out the mission of God. And so again, thank you all so much for your participation. My coordinator and facilitator, my director of enrollment, Reverend Gunn, has Dr. Ramsey made it yet? Okay, all right. Dr. Ramsey has not joined us yet this evening, so I will not prolong the hour. Thank you all again so much for joining us. And if you don't mind, we would like to put your contact information in the chat. And so if anyone wants to ask any questions of you directly or one-on-one, we would love to have them be able to reach out to you. Is that okay? All
Sounds
right, well,
great.
thanks, gentlemen. Have a great evening.
You too. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
bye-bye.
guys. Bye-bye.